Who says I'm not? I say. I do, says the president, and I wouldn't be here if I were the only person who'd had doubts. How's the handsome cousin? I don't know. My revulsion at this conversation, at discussing my feelings for two of the people I care most about with President Snow, chokes me off. Speak, Miss Everdeen. Him I can easily kill off if we don't come to a happy resolution, he says. You aren't doing him a favor by disappearing into the woods with him each Sunday. If he knows this, what else does he know? And how does he know it? Many people could tell him that Gil and I spend our Sundays hunting. Don't we show up at the end of each one loaded with game? Haven't we for years? The real question is what he thinks goes on in the woods beyond District 12. Surely they haven't been tracking us in there. Or have they? Could we have been followed? That seems impossible, at least by a person. Cameras? That never crossed my mind until this moment. The woods have always been a place of safety, our place beyond the reach of the capital, where we're free to say what we feel and be who we are. At least before the games. If we've been watched since, what have they seen? Two people hunting, saying treasonous things against the capital? Yes. But not two people in love, which seems to be President Snow's implication. We are safe on that charge. Unless... It only happened once. It was fast and unexpected, but it did happen. After Pete and I got home from the games, it was several weeks before I saw Gale alone. First there were the obligatory celebrations, a banquet for the victors that only the most high-ranking people were invited to, a holiday for the whole district with free food and entertainers brought in from the capital, Parcel Day, the first of 12, in which food packages were delivered to each person in the district. To see all those hungry kids in the seam, running around, waving cans of applesauce, tins of meat, and even sweets. Back home, too big to carry, would be bags of grain, cans of oil. To know that once a month for a year, they would all receive another parcel, that was one of the few times I actually felt good about winning the games. So between the ceremonies and events, and the reporters documenting my every move as I presided and thanked and kissed PETA for the audience, I had no privacy at all. After a few weeks, things finally died down. The camera crews and reporters packed up and went home. PETA and I assumed the cool relationship we've had ever since. My family settled into our house in the Victor's Village. The everyday life of District 12, workers to the mines, kids to school, resumed its usual pace. I waited until I thought the coast was really clear, and then one Sunday, without telling anyone, I got up hours before dawn and took off for the woods. The weather was still warm enough that I didn't need a jacket. I packed along a bag filled with special foods, cold chicken and cheese, and bakery bread and oranges. Down at my old house, I put on my hunting boots. As usual, the fence was not charged, and it was simple to slip into the woods and retrieve my bow and arrows. I went to our place, Gale and mine's, where we had shared breakfast the morning of the reaping that sent me into the games. I waited at least 2 hours. I'd begun to think that he'd given up on me in the weeks that had passed, or that he no longer cared about me, hated me even. And the idea of losing him forever, my best friend, the only person I'd ever trusted with my secrets, was so painful that I couldn't stand it. Not on top of everything else that had happened. I could feel my eyes tearing up, and my throat starting to close the way it does when I get upset. Then I looked up, and there he was, 3 meters away, just watching me. Without even thinking, I jumped up and threw my arms around him, making some weird sound that combined laughing, choking, and crying. He was holding me so tightly that I couldn't see his face, but it was a really long time before he let me go. And then he didn't have much of a choice because I'd got this unbelievably loud case of the hiccups and had to get a drink. We did what we always did that day. Ate breakfast, hunted and fished and gathered, talked about people in town, but not about us, his new life in the mines, my time in the arena, just about other things. By the time we were at the hole in the fence that's nearest to the hob, I think we really believed that things could be the same, that we could go on as we always had. I'd given all the game to Gale to trade, since we had so much food now. I told him I'd skip the hob, even though I was looking forward to going there, because my mother and sister didn't even know I'd gone hunting, and they'd be wondering where I was. Then suddenly, as I was suggesting I take over the daily snare run, he took my face in his hands and kissed me. I was completely unprepared. You would think that after all the hours I'd spent with Gale, watching him talk and laugh and frown, that I would know all there was to know about his lips. But I hadn't imagined how warm they would feel pressed against my own, or how those hands, which could set the most intricate of snares, could as easily entrap me. I think I made some sort of noise in the back of my throat, and I vaguely remember my fingers, curled tightly closed, resting on his chest. Then he let go and said, "I had to do that. At least once." And he was gone. Despite the fact that the sun was setting and my family would be worried, I sat by a tree next to the fence. I tried to decide how I'd felt about the kiss, if I had liked it or resented it, but all I really remembered was the pressure of Gale's lips and the scent of oranges that still lingered on his skin. It was pointless comparing it with the many kisses I'd exchanged with Peeta. I still hadn't figured out if any of those counted. Finally, I went home. That week I managed the snares and dropped off the meat with Hazel, but I didn't see Gale until Sunday. I had this whole speech worked out, about how I didn't want a boyfriend and never planned on marrying, but I didn't end up using it. Gale acted as if the kiss had never happened. Maybe he was waiting for me to say something, or kiss him back. Instead, I just pretended it had never happened either. But it had. Gale had shattered some invisible barrier between us, and, with it, any hope I had of resuming our old, uncomplicated friendship. Whatever I pretended, I could never look at his lips in quite the same way. This all flashes through my head in an instant as President Snow's eyes bore into me on the heels of his threat to kill Gale. How stupid I've been to think that the Capitol would just ignore me once I'd returned home. Maybe I didn't know about the potential uprisings, but I knew they were angry at me. Instead of acting with the extreme caution the situation called for, what have I done? From the President's point of view, I've ignored Peeta and flaunted my preference for Gale's company before the whole district, and by doing so made it clear I was, in fact, mocking the Capitol. Now I've endangered Gale and his family, and my family, and Peeta too, by my carelessness. "Please don't hurt Gale," I whisper. "He's just my friend. He's been my friend for years. That's all that's between us. Besides, everyone thinks we're cousins now." "I'm only interested in how it affects your dynamic with Peeta, thereby affecting the mood in the districts," he says. "It'll be the same on the tour. I'll be in love with him just as I was," I say. "Just as you are," corrects President Snow. "Just as I am," I confirm. "Only you'll have to do even better if the uprisings are to be averted," he says. "This tour will be your only chance to turn things around." "I know. I will. I'll convince everyone in the districts that I wasn't defying the Capitol, that I was crazy in love," I say. President Snow rises and dabs his puffy lips with a napkin. "Aim higher in case you fall short." "What do you mean? How can I aim higher?" I ask. "Convince me," he says. He drops the napkin and retrieves his book. I don't watch him as he heads for the door, so I flinch when he whispers in my ear, "By the way, I know about the kiss." Then the door clicks shut behind him.